Hey everyone, how are you? I hope you're all having a wonderful Thursday. I know this past weekend in Canada was Valentine's Day, so happy Valentine's Day to everyone. We also had Family Day, so it's a bit of a short week. But today I wanted to start a two-part series. So today we're going to do part one. Tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to have part two to this. And today's talk is going to be all about offshoring, um, around development in offshore countries. And there are so many things that come along with that. So today I'm going to discuss some of the things that you can look for, how to select a good partner, and so on. So if you have any questions throughout this session, please feel free to send them my way and I will try to get to them throughout the session. And so let's get started. Being in business for 27 years and building custom software applications, the industry has changed a lot throughout the years with the globalized economy and being able to hire talent outside of your own country and having that talent be accessible through technology has made it a lot easier for companies to leverage teams outside of the country where they reside. And a lot of companies have been doing that because there is a couple of advantages, which is the biggest one is mostly cost. And because the cost can be lower when you are offshoring, it means you can also have a bigger team. However, there are some pros and cons to that. And today I want to talk about some of those cons and so sort of how to overcome them and how to select a good offshore company. So obviously, Konverge has been in business for 27 years, and we also have offshore teams. We actually work with some offshore teams that we have partnered with. We have teams that are dedicated teams that we've put together in other countries in order to support our clients using different platforms and having different needs. So some of the things that, common questions that business managers who are looking to either build something from scratch or have something that is being built on top of an existing application, or a startup that has an idea and is looking for a cost-effective way to develop that application. Some common things I get asked all the time is, what resources do we have to make this product or update a reality? Who can we hire to code it? And what is the budget? Obviously, those are the first three things to sort of think about before taking the next step. And companies have to make tough decisions. So, do we hire someone in-house? Or does it make more sense to outsource? So there's a couple of things you're going to have to look at in order to make that decision. What are the different types of outsourcing available? What is the difference between offshore and nearshore? So these are all things that sort of have to go into the thought process. In today's part one series, I'm going to answer most of these questions, and I'm going to start with the first big question that I get asked very, very often. Should I offshore my project? The answer to that is yes. You should offshore your project. Do you have to offshore it? No. There's a couple of ways to make that decision. Offshoring, the benefits of offshoring is costs. The cost is very much reduced, which means you can build for a little bit less money. But also the benefit of that is you can get a larger team, which essentially could mean that you get your project built faster. So yes, you can offshore if that's the way you want to go. And should you? Sure. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't consider working with a onshore partner located here. There are benefits to that as well. And I'm going to get into those throughout these questions. So the answer is yes. My next question. What is the dangers of offshoring? So there are tons. There's actually quite a bit that people don't really think about. So the first thing is, where are you going to offshore? What country? And the reason why that's very important is because you need to look at things like time zone. If you are in a completely different time zone and your daytime is their nighttime, you're going to have a really, really, really hard time communicating with that team. You're going to have a hard time setting up meetings because they're going to be asleep when you're awake. And if you don't have consistent access to your offshore team, there are so many issues that can come up. Communication is key when building a project, and you need to be able to have that day-to-day stand-up meetings, reviews, and making sure that they're on track. So time zone, a big one to look at. Another one is language. If the team that you're working with only has sort of basic English skills, you're going to run into a few problems. You're going to run into them maybe not being able to understand or translate the requirements that you're trying to portray and communicate. And so the dangers of that is that they might interpret what you're saying differently and build it differently. Another danger to that is obviously, spelling mistakes in the actual application, sometimes having things that really don't make any sense. You cannot have resources that don't speak, great English, communicate directly with your clients if you are using an offshore team to build something for your client and not yourself necessarily. And even if you are using an offshore team to build something for yourself, you might have a very hard time sort of trying to communicate and get your point across. This is something that I see on a regular basis. So those are some of the things that you really need to be careful. So far, time zone, English communication skills, and there are other things like, what does their team look like? Are they just providing you a bunch of developers and you have to communicate what you need? Do they have a process that they're following? So, what is their process? Do you understand their process? Can you follow their process? Can they follow your process if you have one? So, one thing that I want to add to this is I come across this a lot, and I feel like I keep repeating myself, but I think it's a really important point. Now with technology being available to pretty much everyone and learning technology has become a lot easier. It's, we have a lot more developers out in the world. It's easier to learn how to develop software applications. So with that, it means that, a lot of people think that it's easy to build software. And maybe it can be, but it's not. It's a very rigorous process that needs to be followed in order to get exactly what you need. And, you can't build an application in a week or 2 or 3, or sometimes, we get clients like, can I get this in 2 months? Like, that's not going to happen. If you want a good application built properly, there has to be a process that's followed. You have to make sure you have the proper resources on the project who are going to understand it. You have to be following a process. So one of the things that I find with offshore teams is they have a bunch of developers sitting around waiting to get put on a project. The minute you sign with them, they assign those developers to your project. And we find that clients are dealing directly with developers, sort of communicating what they want built. That is the complete wrong way to go about it. You should never be speaking directly to developers. The proper process is, if you're going to work with an offshore company, they need to have things like a project manager in place that's going to cater to you and take care of the communication. Obviously, that person has to speak fluent English and be able to communicate. You also need a business analyst, and the reason for that is you always, 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 always need to document everything that's being done. Documentation is super important to for the architecture. So software needs to be architect, and in order to architect something, you need blueprints, you need things to be documented. It's the same thing when you're building software. I always sort of refer to building software like building a house. You start with the foundation, and that's built on the foundation, and then you have the blueprints. And once you have the foundation, you sort of know what you can build on top. So if you want a building that's 3 stories high, the foundation has to be built to accommodate 3 stories. But if you want a building that's 20 stories high, the foundation has to be able to support that. So all the work that's done up front is super important, because if you want to be able to sort of scale your software down the road, you need a solid foundation. And that foundation starts with proper product management, business analysts documenting everything, architecture being complete. You need to have source code reviews being done throughout the project, especially when you're working with an offshore team. Every time something is released to you, source code reviews should be done. Are they using proper procedures? Are they, has the system been QA'd, and is there bugs? When I refer to bugs, I'm talking about, okay, so let me explain what bugs are. Bugs are when you click on something and there's an error button and it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So usually a software development team will have QA people who are testing the application throughout the development lifecycle. And then we have acceptance testing, which is where you have a business analyst who will now start testing the application, but they're not testing for bugs. They are testing for accuracy. They're testing to make sure that the development fits the requirement and it's been built that way. So, having a proper team is super important, and having a team that follows a process that can be managed. As a client, when you're hiring an offshore company, it should not be that much work for you. First of all, if you don't know that much about technology and you have an idea and you want something built, you're not going to be able to manage it if you don't have the experience and the discipline that goes behind it. So being aware of these things is super important, and it's something that is critical in making the project a success. Next question, does it make financial sense to offshore? Yes and no. Way too often in my career in tech of 14 years, way too often, I get clients coming to us saying that they hired an offshore company and they were super excited about it and they had a budget, and they come to us at Konverge, a couple months later and say, can you help me? I received this release from an offshore company that I was working with, and it's not what I was expecting. I've spent all of this money. Can you guys reuse this code and sort of get me to where I need to be? Or how much would it be for me to build this thing from scratch? And there are a lot of horror stories out there with clients having bad experiences with offshore. And I'm not blaming the offshore companies at all. I'm just saying that the reason why these things happen is because the processes and the discipline has not been put in place. And the clients hire these offshore companies and are sort of left to manage those projects themselves. And at the end of the day, they don't exactly have the experience to manage an offshore company. And once that piece is missing, everything starts, everything can go wrong. And so whenever we have to take over a project that's been offshored, we always have to look at the quality of the work. And usually that'll tell us whether the client made the right decision selecting the right offshore partner, because that's another step in the process. If you're going to offshore, you have to make sure that you're selecting the right offshore partner. And there are a couple of things that you need to look for when selecting a partner. Can they handle your type of project, or are they is their expertise and domain in a specific area, and they really shouldn't be building this for you. So there's a lot of things to sort of consider when going through that process. And sometimes it makes financial sense completely, but sometimes, and more often than I like to say, it doesn't make financial sense, because clients end up having to spend triple, double, triple of the original budget that they had originally intended to spend. And it makes me a little bit sad sometimes when clients are super frustrated and they're coming to us and their business are hanging, waiting for this application to be built. And we're working with some clients right now that have gone through this experience, and it's COVID, and they want to be able to have their business go digital, to help them support their clients and bring in more business and help their businesses strive and pivot during these times. And they're really relying on this piece of technology that they spent all this money building, and what they got wasn't what they were expecting. And there's so many reasons why they didn't get it. Obviously, I've already talked about some of the points, but they never ever imagined that they were going to have this type of experience. So I do want to talk about these things, because I think it's important for people to understand that it's okay to offshore, but there are a lot of risks and pros and cons to it. And there are a lot of criterias that you should be looking at before selecting an offshore partner. And there's a lot of things that you need to be doing in order to make the experience a success. Tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about part 2 of this series, which is going to be at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'm going to be talking more about, software development methodology, technical and domain expertise, documentation, size of the team, education requirement, references, all of those things. Today, I sort of want to stick to, what are the pros and cons, and then tomorrow we'll get into more detail on things to look for and how to select that partner and who you can work with. So to take us to the next question I have here, what are some common things that causes offshore projects to fail? And I've already explained quite a few of them, which is, process, selecting the right partner. And how do you select the right partner? There are criterias that you have to look at when selecting a partner. You do have to be a little educated in the space in order to make the right decisions for your business. And there's also there's not just processes and documentation, but also a relationship. The people that you're going to be working with, you're not going to be working with them for a week or two, a month or 2 or 3. You're probably going to be working with them long term. And even after you're done developing the application, you're going to need support and maintenance. So you're looking at a partner, you're looking at a relationship. And one of the criteria you should be looking at when sort of going through that process is, do I have a good relationship with this team? Can I talk to them freely? Do they understand me? Am I going to be able to work with them long term? Sometimes, you meet people, you meet the team, and you just get that feeling like, I don't know if they're going to do a good job on my project. I don't really like what this person is saying. I don't agree with that. So it's really good to shop around if you're going to make that decision to offshore. You have to look at a couple of different teams. You have to analyze. You have to look at references. You have to look at their past work and see what they've done and what they've built and what is their expert domain. So, there's a lot of things to look for, and there are, a lot of causes why offshore projects fail. And there are just a lot of things to look for. And I I see it way too often when clients are frustrated because something has gone wrong. And there's no one to blame here. You don't blame the offshore team. You can't blame the person that's decided to work with the offshore team. offshore teams also struggle because their goal is to build, build, build. You say to them, I have this idea, here's what it looks like, and they're like, okay, let's go out and build. There isn't that leadership or that in between, like a business analyst, a project manager, to sort of control the whole process, and things can really get lost in translation in between. And when you work with a team that their English is not great, then that's it. Like you're already set up for failure right from the get-go. Being able to really communicate and explain what you want is one thing, but people can translate that into so many different things. That's why I keep going back to having, everything documented. And another thing too that I also want to bring up, a lot of times, even when we're building software with our clients, throughout the documentation process, so the client comes to us upfront and says, hey, Sonia, I want you to build this application for me that's going to help me manage my business and my employees and my clients. Great. I know exactly what I want. This is what I want you to build. Let's do it. But then we always find once we sit down with the clients and we actually start documenting, there are a lot of things that you didn't think about. There are a lot of case scenarios that you didn't think could happen throughout the process. And sitting down with a team that's really going to take the time to understand your requirements, ask the tough questions, and not just ask tough questions, but also make suggestions. If you say, I want this built, it should be the business analyst's job to say, well, okay, great. Have you thought about this scenario? And have you thought about that scenario? And, what about if you add this piece of functionality? Wouldn't that make everybody's job easier? So throughout the documentation process, a lot of magic can happen. And that magic is the client being able to tell us what they want and us being able to add on that and really create a piece of software that is exactly what the client wants. When clients originally think of an idea, they don't think it through 100%. They're like, I sort of want it to do this, but they don't think about all the inner workings that are going to happen throughout that, in that software. And there are so many case scenarios. So it's important to do that. And since I keep talking about business analysts, let me just sort of take some time to explain what that is. A business analyst is a person who has a technical background and works with clients to pick their brain around what they want developed. They are people with business experience, and they are able to envision what the client wants ahead of time. And then what they do with that information, they pick the client's brain and they document. And then what they do is they create what we call a business requirement document, where we have everything listed that the client wants built. And in addition to that, we also build what we call wireframes, which are examples of how the actual software is going to work. So when you click here, this will happen. You click here, this will happen. You click here, these two scenarios could happen. If you select this one, it goes here. If you select that one, it goes to somewhere else. And that document, sometimes it can be 100 pages, sometimes it can be 4, 5, 6, 1,000 pages. It depends on the size of the application that's being built. But it is such an important, I can't say it enough, it is such an important process in the whole development lifecycle. If that's not being done by an offshore team, that's already an indicator to you very early on that that's not a team you should be going with. When you are looking at criteria to select an offshore partner, one of the things that you have to look up upfront is how are they going to manage this project? So is there a project manager? But more importantly, is there a business analyst that's going to be documenting all of this information? Because once it's documented, you can always go back to that document anytime. And it's not just, the document is not just useful for when you start development. I'll give you an example. If you're going to build a SaaS-based product, so software as a service is a product that's built that's going to be on the cloud and is going to have multi-tenants. So an example of that is, a piece of software that you subscribe to and you have, you pay for it yearly, you pay for it monthly, and you get access to this software whenever you want. An example of a SaaS-based software is, for example, FreshBooks. You can go on their website, you can sign up to use their service, and you can be in China, in Europe, anywhere in the world. As long as you have internet connection, you can log into your account and have access to all of your information. That's basically software as a service. And when you're building software, SaaS-based software, it's very different than building, an application that's going to be just for an internal company that's, using it for their employees only, or for their clients, but it's hosted on a local server. So there's also different ways of building applications. And when you're using SaaS, the process is a little bit different, and you really have to look at the competitor. How can an offshore company really be able to build the right tools for you? And how do you hire a company, an offshore company? Well, you have to really, really do your due diligence. And we do this for our clients, and we've recently, put together a whole program around helping clients do offshoring. And because we've identified all of these issues with requirements and having proper requirements documented, and choosing a business analyst and a project manager and choosing the right offshore partner, we have a service where we will do all of that for you. So what happens here is, Konverge comes in as a partner, and the clients tell us what they want built, and we go off and we put together a team, an onshore team, so a team here in Canada. And that team consists of a project manager, business analyst, development manager, and quality assurance. So that's all done onshore. And then we will select an offshore partner. So we have offshore partners that we've worked with for many, many, many years, and we know them and we know their capabilities already. We've already done all the vetting, all the research, so we know what they can do for us. And we serve as a middleman for the client and the offshore company. So we will make sure that all of that documentation that I'm talking about is always done. It's always there. We make sure that there's a project manager assigned to each project, and the project manager's job is to take care of the communication between the client and the offshore team, making sure that everything the client is saying and needs is communicated properly to the offshore team, and that they understand the information. There are daily stand-ups that need to be done with the offshore team. And a daily stand-up is, basically a check-in of where we are. So once the requirements are done and the offshore team starts building, and we always do everything in Agile, we have to look at, where are they in the development? We have to make sure we're doing source code reviews. And what that is checking the source code, making sure that they are developing to the highest quality that we expect. We don't want to have software come to us that, 10 months down the road is going to break or not going to work. So we do all the work of vetting the right offshore company for clients, and that really saves the client a lot of time and money. Now, it is a little bit more expensive to work with a party that's going to do that for you versus you working directly with your clients, but there is a lot of savings there as well, because at the end of the day, yes, you're going to have to spend on having a company here do all of that work for you, but the end result is going to be you getting the software that does exactly what you want. It's going to it's going to have all the features that you expected. It's going to work exactly how you wanted. It's going to be installed on a server, tested on the server. We leave no rock unturned. Everything is done for you. So, just to iterate sort of what I'm talking about, should you hire an offshore company? Yes, but work with a onshore partner to manage that for you. And that's exactly what we've started offering our clients because, again, like I've said before, too often are we having the experience of clients saying to us and saying that they have horror stories or terrible experience with working with an offshore team. Again, it doesn't mean that it's the offshore team's fault, but they need to be managed properly. So working with a company that understands you, speaks your language, is going to take the time to really, really document what you're looking for, and then is able to translate that to a offshore team, is able to select an offshore team for you that is appropriate for what you're looking to build, and has the right domain and uses the right technology and is going to be able to do a great job. So using a onshore company to mitigate all of those risks is really the way to go. So I want to say thank you for joining me today. I know I sort of went on back and forth on a couple of the questions, but tomorrow I'm going to sort of break it down. Tomorrow, join me at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I'm going to be discussing all the things to look for and do after you've decided to go to select an offshore partner, and how to work with an onshore partner to make sure that you get everything that you wanted, and I'm going to go a lot more into detail about the specifics of the different list of things that you should be really looking for. So thank you for joining me on this Thursday. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and I will see you tomorrow at 11 Eastern Standard Time. Again, my name is Sonia. I'm director at Konverge Digital Solutions, and if you have any questions for me, please do send them my way, and I will try to get them answered in tomorrow's session, or I will find a way to get them to you. Thank you.